game that had been thought about and talked about for a long time by a bunch of Ole Miss fans, and clearly had been thought about a lot for a long time by the head coach on the opposing sideline, Hugh Freeze, was played on Saturday night at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Great crowd. 88,000 plus. It was packed. It looked fantastic. I have always been very, very complimentary of Auburn's stadium and game day environment and all those things, and it looked fantastic on Saturday night. Ole Miss did what we talked about last week, what we talked about on Friday, and kind of what they had to do. I thought they did what they had to do. I was intrigued by the fact that Auburn got the ball first. It was, it's like, was that a trolling move? Did you all of a sudden have immense confidence in your offense? What was the deal? Because basically everybody goes on defense first, and Lane Kiffin always takes the ball first. Maybe Hugh Freeze always does that too. I don't know.
I would
won the toss.
If I was given the choice, I would try to keep Ole Miss's offense off the field first, considering how good they are on their first possession of basically every game.
Yeah. But if you feel like you're likely going to need a bonus possession in the second half and you believe in your defense, I don't know. So Auburn got the ball first and looked like they were going to go 3 and out, and then they converted, and then they went 3 and out after that and punted it away. So it wasn't 3 and out. It was like 7 and out. And Ole Miss got the ball back, and they went 48 yards in 9 plays and took 6:07 off the clock. It was not like a fast tempo deal. And the drive was capped when Jackson Dart hit Zachary Franklin on an 11-yard touchdown pass to take a 7-0 lead. And I thought, all right, that's kind of what Ole Miss needed to do. But then Auburn came right back and scored in 5 plays and 75 yards in less than 2 minutes, and a big run from Jarquez Hunter. 53-yard touchdown run. And the only person that had a chance to make a tackle on that play was Suntarian Perkins. He was kind of the offside linebacker that was coming in, and it was like a come across the field. You got to hit him and wrap him up. He kind of dived at him, didn't get a lot there. Jarquez Hunter ran through what kind of looked like an arm tackle, even though he was just trying to get to him. And then Hunter's off to the races. But then Ole Miss answered less than 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes later with a touchdown, and they went ahead 14-7. Auburn scored early in the second quarter, and it was like, wait, it was not on the bingo card for this game to be a track meet. And yet it was 14-14 with 11:44 to play in the second quarter.
Yeah, that second touchdown coming off of not a bad decision. So when I say bad interception, the decision was totally fine. Ball was terribly thrown, way behind Franklin. Tipped it up in the air. Auburn intercepts it, and a long return led to that touchdown.
And there was not another point scored until the final play of the third quarter. Ole Miss fiddle-farted around for most of the third quarter. Just didn't do much of anything. Yeah, hey, Dad. Give me that little, huh? Yes. They did.
Okay.
They kind of did that until that last drive of the third quarter, absent defense.
All right. So I made some notes about the game when I was on the plane yesterday coming home. And this was like my thoughts in real time with a little bit of time to think about it. Hustling to get a playoff before the end of the third quarter made no sense to me. I was like, hey, they don't have to run another play. Go flip it to the other end, go try and get a touchdown on the first play. And they're going, like, wait, is he just walking to the line like they're just going to kind of make sure Auburn's prepared? Boom, they run a play, touchdown, and Ole Miss goes up 21-14. And that made no sense to me in real time. I'm like, it's a tight game. You better milk these last whatever seconds. You might need those or need Auburn not to have them later. In real time, I thought that was a strange move. They could have easily let the clock run out and decide what you wanted to do. But doing that would have given Auburn's defense about a 4-minute rest on its sideline. Auburn, like almost every stadium in the SEC, has a light show. And so they would have had a 14-14 game with a goal-to-go play on the first play of the fourth quarter after killing the lights and turning on the strobes and the colors, and the crowd is going nuts, and you would have not been able to hear yourself think, and you would have given the defense a 4-minute rest. And so I thought it made sense to go for it there. Hustle to the line. They don't know if you're going to snap it or not. Go block it up and score a touchdown. That's exactly what Ole Miss did. And so it made more sense thinking about it after. Did you guys see that play at all? Be like, why are they hurrying to get a playoff here?
I didn't think about it like you did. I figured, you've got Auburn kind of on their heels. Just go punch it in and kind of exclamation point that. But that does make sense, a lot of sense. You want to talk about game management. If that was the thought process, it's really heady.
And then Ole Miss scored again with 7:51 to go. Quinshon Judkins ran it in from 4 yards out, made it 28-14, and the ball game was over at that point.
Auburn at that point. So what? 7 minutes ago, you said Ole Miss up 28-14.
7:51 to play. Ole Miss up 28-14. It's a 2-score game. There aren't many teams that think or know they're done in a 2-score game with 8 minutes to play.
Oh, they were done. Richard, we lost you. But yeah, Auburn was done at that point. They had 160 yards of offense did Auburn and 5 first downs at that point in the game. 160 yards and 5 first downs. So that was the ball game right there.
The stat that drove me crazy, or maybe not drove me crazy, but Auburn had thrown, before the final drive of the game, Auburn had thrown 6 passes. And we're sitting here talking earlier about State and Arkansas and the bad offense, but my goodness. I mean, if Auburn doesn't get the long run from Hunter, that's one of the most putrid offensive performances you ever see. I can't wait for this weekend, by the way. We may have a Minnesota-Iowa over-under situation. I haven't looked at what it is, but my goodness, don't take the over, whatever you do.
It's probably not good.
You pay for all your Christmas gifts.
Play calling was awful. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was true or not, but Hugh told the broadcast team that when Thorne is in the game, Montgomery's calling plays. When Ashford is in the game, he's calling plays because that makes sense.
That makes sense.
And also they practiced on Friday for the first time ever. They made sure that they practiced on Friday as well. Very clearly, he put extra emphasis on this game, and it was glaringly obvious in that spot. And then you got the vintage Hugh Freeze moment. So you get the ball back from Ole Miss. You're in plus territory. It's second down, and Auburn's got all the momentum. And what do? They put their third-string quarterback at wide receiver. And, hey, Dad, you can hear Ole Miss's players on the broadcast yelling that it's double. You can hear them calling it out, and he tries to do a double pass, and it gets tackled for like an 8-yard loss, and then they give the ball back to Ole Miss, and that was vintage Freeze. But, man, we talked about all week. Ole Miss cannot if Ole Miss just plays clean, if they just play clean within themselves, don't turn it over, don't make mistakes, they'll win this game going away. Ole Miss did the exact opposite of that for 3 quarters.
Yeah.
They played first half
and
into the third quarter as bad as they possibly could have played. You had a bad turnover. You had a botched field goal snap on a chip shot that took 3 points off the board. You had a 10-yard punt. You had a muffed punt that you recovered, but it cost you 15 yards or so in field position. You had penalty after penalty after penalty. They played as sloppy as they possibly could have to keep Auburn in that game, and yet turned it on when they had to. A 90-yard touchdown drive followed by a 70-yard touchdown drive. Defense was really good, thanks to Hugh Freeze's offense being as bad as it is. And they found a way to win a game that they were struggling in early for the third week in a row.
I tell you, this is the one thing watching these highlights that makes me, if you ever doubt that Kiffin's a good play caller, at least 3 times a game, Ole Miss will throw to a person that is literally wide open.
Yeah.
Literally. Nobody within 5 yards of him either direction. And it happens every game. When's the last time that happened for State? When's the last time you remember, that guy's wide open? It's been a while.
Yeah, been a long while. We'll be right back. We'll get Richard back in
half for Ole Miss. And you guys may have talked about this when my deal cut out a second ago. I don't know. I mean, it was a comedy of errors. I know that Ole Miss led 14-7. It was tied 14 at the half. So what'd you have? You had drops. You had penalties. You had a muffed punt return, or muffed punt. You muff the snap on a field goal. What? Get the snap and put it down so the guy can kick the field goal. And threw a terrible interception. That was all in the first half. Was it 7 first-half penalties?
7 penalties, yeah.
And look, this is not a referee conversation. I don't know how many of them were legit, how many of them were questionable, ticky-tack, whatever. They called them, though, over and over and over. Stop cheating. Just play. Play without cheating.
There was a couple of holdings that were absolutely the appropriate calls at the time. I know that.
Okay. And then he got to the third quarter. And Ole Miss, first 3 drives of the third quarter, they had to punt. And I'm sure, like many of you, I'm part of a couple of group texts. And those group texts were popping. Yeah. You know, they were not overly complimentary to Charlie Weiss Jr. for a specific period of time. And what's going on with play calling? And why are they doing what they're doing? And then it was like the offense flipped a switch.
After, by the way, a holding on a punt that went in the end zone. I mean, that's the kind, you said comedy of errors. That's exactly right. Ole Miss is getting a touchback, and a holding call starts that drive on their own 10 instead of the 20 because there was a holding on a punt that went in the end zone. But Jackson Dart had been bad, frankly, for his standard anyway, up until that drive. And it's a tie game in the third quarter, and you got a first down on your own 10-yard line. Couple of perfect passes to Trey Harris. Boom. Touchdown. Your defense gets you the ball back. You're 70 yards away from the end zone. Scramble drill, you get a first down. Throw a stunning pass down the sideline to Trey Harris again. Boom, touchdown. So he had been bad. He was on the road, hostile environment, 90 yards away, all that stuff. And then he just flipped a switch and turned it on and was clutch. Those 2 drives, just perfect passes, runs, wins the game.
What was that? The throw to I guess he was trying to get it to Franklin. That was like 2 yards behind him, and Franklin reached back behind him and tips the ball up into the air, and it's intercepted with a big interception return. And you're like, what happened? And I say what was that because of the 2 plays that you just mentioned. The throw to Caden Prieskorn and the throw to Trey Harris are 2 of like you cannot throw the football any better than he did on those 2 passes. And I thought Prieskorn sold it as well. It's like he was running a route, and it was like he didn't even acknowledge that the ball was on the way until he just reached out his hands and grabbed it. And then, like, the Auburn was like, oh, I got to tackle this big oaf. And then he just, like, goes for 15 more yards while the guy's, like, trying to figure out a way to wrestle him to the ground. And then the Trey Harris throw. And really both of them were just beautiful. And Ole Miss Auburn, with Ole Miss playing a little softer defense, goes down, and they score the touchdown. But did you watch that last drive by Auburn and go, where's the urgency? Like, you're down 2 scores. You have to score twice to even give yourself a chance to get to overtime or win it in regulation. You should hurry. Why are you not hurrying? And there were questions to Hugh Freeze, like, hey, you were better in tempo at the end of the game. That's not what tempo used to look like with Hugh Freeze.
No, and also Ole Miss was playing they were in prevent.
It wasn't a prevent, but it was a soft, two deep safeties, no big play behind you, soft coverage on the outside. We're more than happy for you to complete. That's the one to Trey Harris. Yeah, that's pretty good. Pretty darn good if you're watching on SuperTalk TV. But Ole Miss was more than happy for Auburn to complete 4, 5, 7-yard passes over and over and over and over. And
Hugh looks defeated. And I don't know what to attribute that to.
There were some other observations as to what he looked like as well.
Oh, like he looked like crap is what he looked like, honestly, physically. He looks like he's worn out and tired. And, I mean, I don't like using this phrase very often. Like Ole Miss people around the Tulane game were like, oh, it's Tulane Super Bowl. And I don't like that phrase very often. A team's going to play hard today? Okay, they should play hard every week. But that game was clearly different to Hugh Freeze. That was an emotional game for a lot of reasons. He handled it differently, and he lost. And he lost, and it's not being excused over there either. I mean, it's remarkably stupid, in my opinion, but did you see the headline of a column today in AL.com? That the honeymoon is over for Hugh Freeze. It was written on October 22nd of his first season. These people that he works for, you cannot forget what they did to Brian Harsin. He didn't win enough games in year one, so they tried to manufacture an extramarital affair to get him fired without paying a buyout after 1 year. And he can't take this Auburn roster and make it beat a top 15 team, and the honeymoon is over. Just an absolutely absurd thing to think. So it's preposterous that Auburn people think that this team should be better than it is right now. And they're already...
Oh, hold on a second. It's not preposterous to think that they should be better than they are right now. It is preposterous to think that they should win 8 games.
Sure.
That they should have been good. But to think that this Auburn... if I'm an Auburn fan, I am angry at what my team looks like. Because they look non-competitive.
But
you went out and hired an offensive guru, and they are horrible.
They're horrible.
On the offensive side.
They are. But how many coaches in the SEC could win? And now it's partially his fault. True. But it's not like he identified Peyton Thorne as his guy. I mean, they tried a lot of guys, and he just couldn't get any of them, which is his fault. But how many teams in the SEC could win with Peyton Thorne? I mean, even Georgia couldn't win with that dude. He's awful. I'm sorry to say that about a college kid, but he is awful. And Ashford can't throw the ball. And he didn't make great decisions.
He's making more money this year than you are, Borky. You can say whatever you want about him.
Fact. That is very true. So, I mean, that's a problem, but they had Georgia on the ropes. Lost by a touchdown. They had top 15 Ole Miss on the ropes, lost by a touchdown. And they're already, honeymoon's over, he's not going to win here. What's up? What's wrong? They think that they're Georgia, and they expect better than Georgia results. Remember Kirby Smart's first year in Athens? Remember how that went? Richard, you were on the sidelines for his game in Oxford. You remember how bad they were?
They still won 7 games, though.
They did?
That was a better situation. He took over a better situation than Hugh Freeze took over in Auburn. But anyway.
The lack of patience there it's astounding to me. I mean, you really expected this to not be a team? We spent all summer talking about this roster is not ready to compete. If they go to a bowl game, if they win more than they lose, it's a nice coaching job and they're on schedule.
Let me throw some observations that I had from the game at you and see if any of these stand out for you. I thought the running game was really good for Ole Miss. They end up with, 230 or so yards rushing. And to me, it's people like to focus on one stud running back in Quinshon Judkins, but it feels like you really need 2 horses if you're going to have an elite running game, and Ole Miss has got that. I know Ulysses Bentley didn't have like a crazy night in terms of yards, but he is important because, 1, he's good when he's on the field, and 2, it gives you the ability to keep Quinshon Judkins fresh in the game. And so having 2 really good running backs. And look, Ole Miss ran the ball how many times? Let's see, I've got it pulled up right here. Ole Miss ran the ball 39 times. No, that's Auburn. Ole Miss ran it 56 times. Guess what? You got enough carries to go around. 21 carries for Judkins, 17 for Bentley. Jackson Dart carries it 14 times. And, oh, by the way, you handed off to Dayton Wade twice. That's great running back. You're not overusing anybody. Trey Harris is a difference maker. 4 catches for 102 yards. Kamari Franklin can help Ole Miss in the final 5 games of the regular season. And you saw that there was some try. I mean, Jackson Dart went to him more this week. He had 4 catches. He had 2 catches for 15 yards. And one of them was a touchdown. They need to get Jordan Watkins back, but that's pretty gutsy to see him, a week, 2 weeks after having 2 plates inserted into his hand and still having stitches to be back on the field and playing. Thought the defense tackled well. Pretty good night for the Ole Miss secondary. We'll be back right after. Everyone and the SEC looks average. The only difference is the talent level at Alabama and Georgia. I will give it to Ole Miss. They just keep winning.
Splitting hairs, I think that's an oversimplification, though. Because if everybody was average, then you wouldn't have a 6-1 team. You wouldn't have LSU being where they are. Missouri's not average. Missouri's not average. LSU's not average. Ole Miss is not average.
What I would say, there's not an elite team, I don't think. This isn't like a couple years ago with Georgia and Alabama. I think Georgia's really good. Alabama's good. But there's not a just surefire, they are going to win the national championship team in this mix.
I agree with that.
I do wonder if, when matched up with the elite teams from other conferences, what the result would be.
We are about to find out. I mean,
we'll find out soon enough.
We think Michigan.
We saw LSU, Florida State.
We did. Florida State's really good.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, okay, what is the team when they are at
Texas.
their best? When have we seen that this year? I think we saw Florida State at their best in the season opener against LSU.
In the second half, they were really impressive
Alabama
as well this past Saturday.
We might have seen Alabama at its best this past Saturday.
In the second half.
In the second half, yeah.
Michigan hadn't been challenged yet. They will soon, but they haven't been yet.
Georgia was at its best against Kentucky. They throttled Kentucky. It was like, hey, remember? Yeah, you guys remember us?
Yeah.
Kyle
McCord's not consistent enough to win a championship. He's not. With those weapons, they're not winning a championship at Ohio State right now. He's got to be a lot better. As good as they are defensively, it doesn't matter.
This is a year that if we did, we've talked about in the past, like, well, you'll have the 12 teams, and there's no way a 12 they could maybe beat the 5, but there's no way they would beat the 1. This is a year where a 12 could beat a 1.
You remember a couple of weeks ago when I asked the question, you kind of looked at me like I was crazy. Is Southern Cal the 4th best team in the Pac-12?
They may be the 6th or 7th best team. Yeah, that's where my confusion was. Are they even the 4th?
Oh, I thought you said no. They're still the 2nd or 3rd best team.
No, I think I'm just trying to catch up with myself.
Oh, okay.
To make myself look better.
We are revisionist historying it real quick. Okay.
Yes, we are revisionist historying it.
People do that too much. And I saw it over the weekend as well. Like, somebody said, Ole Miss just getting lucky in these games. Well, okay, if you want to call it that, but their point differential in the fourth quarter.
Hold on a second. When has Ole Miss gotten lucky this year?
Exactly. So their point differential, they double up their opponents in the fourth quarter this season. Double the points in their opponent in the fourth quarter. That's not luck. It's turning it on when they have to. But when you look around the rest of college football, Texas should have lost. Oklahoma should have lost to UCF. Plumlee, almost the hero in Norman on Saturday. He played well there for a little while. If not for fortunate officiating, Washington would have lost to a 1-win Arizona State team. And how about a team that actually lost? North Carolina and Drake May lost to a 1-win Virginia team, which will be my winner here coming up with what that program's dealt with. So when you watch like one team, you get kind of hyper-focused on all of their flaws. Like, Ole Miss is a flawed football team. There's no doubt about it. If they start the game against Texas A&M the way they did on Saturday, they're going to get beat. Vanderbilt can't beat them. But if you start that way against A&M, you're going to get beat. So they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but when you look around the country at all these really good teams and how they have to survive these games sometimes, you can't tell me that, well, Ole Miss is lucky. Well, then Washington's lucky. Oregon's lucky.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's lucky. Ohio State's lucky.
Luck is part of being a good team. Good teams have a bit of luck.
You need some breaks.
We were talking about Ole Miss. We're talking about Ole Miss on the podcast for tomorrow, and somebody brought this up on a message board, and I hadn't really thought about it, but it's kind of true. Like, yes, Ole Miss was incredible in the game against LSU offensively. But in their other 3 conference games, 10 points, 27 points, 28 points. They've just been okay. And, they weren't good at all against Alabama. Is the LSU game just this massive outlier, or are we going to see this Ole Miss offense explode like that again before the end of the season?
Yeah. I did an interview last week, and somebody was asking me about Ole Miss, and I was like, you find yourself in this, well, how good is the team that I follow? And if your answer is, well, we don't know yet, there comes a point where you go, well, when are you going to know? Right? So if you don't know yet how good Ole Miss is, when are you going to know? When they beat a bad Auburn team on the road? When they win at home against a bad Vanderbilt team? When they beat Texas A&M at home? Well, yeah, that's the one. Right up until the point where people start detracting from A&M and the fact that they're in a tailspin, and it's Jimbo and it's all these things. I mean, I've heard people that are trying to. It's like LSU gets more credit for losing that game to Ole Miss than Ole Miss gets for winning it. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, what's the point in playing the games if the winner doesn't kind of? And that makes sense. And LSU's lost twice. Now, if Ole Miss were to win at Georgia, then everybody's on the bandwagon. But that's the number one team in the country on the road. So if Ole Miss beats Vanderbilt and beats A&M and loses to Georgia and beats ULM and wins in Starkville and finishes the regular season 10-2 and goes to an Access Bowl, do we know yet? Is that really a good team? I mean, at some point, the scoreboard matters. Right? You either won or you lost.
We had this same discussion about Ole Miss last year. We really did. It's like
we did.
Every week it was like, but are they good? And by the end of the season, they were just okay.
But
having watched that team last year and watching this team this year, do you see the same thing?
This team is better, and they've beaten two of the teams that beat them last year. They beat LSU and they beat Arkansas. Now, I think they'll lose to Georgia, and I think they're going to beat Texas A&M, but A&M is a team that could come to Oxford and find a way to win. I think they'll win the Egg Bowl as we sit here today, too. So we'll have to just sort of wait and see. But if somebody came to me like, is Ole Miss a good team? Yes, Ole Miss is a good football team.
They got to find a way to get out of their own way. I mean, you mentioned the LSU game. Is that an anomaly or not? Because when they don't make mistakes, you see what they're capable of. When they're not getting themselves off schedule with a holding penalty to start a drive or whatever, you see what they're capable of. And so when is that going to happen? That's something that, like we said at the very beginning of the show, you take a win in the SEC West where you can get that win. You take that win 100 times out of 100 on the road. I mean, you're happy with that result. But, man, what is it that is causing them to not be sharp from quarter one to quarter four instead of having to turn it on when it counts, which is a mark of a team with good leadership and good quarterback play and all that? That's all true, but if I'm an Ole Miss fan sitting here today, I am worried about that Texas A&M game, though, because they have a defensive front that can be disruptive, and if you shoot yourself in the foot like they did this past Saturday, that's a game that you lose in this special season that's setting up for you. You'll be favored in every game but one for the rest of the way. And it's Georgia.
Yeah.
If it goes to chalk, you're going back to an Access Bowl.
I want to run a couple of these other notes by you that I made. Auburn is really, really bad offensively, but they've got some dudes on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Hugh Freeze doesn't learn from his mistakes. I hope that's not the case in all of his mistakes. Do you guys remember that stupid reverse pass in his second year in Oxford in Tuscaloosa where he decided that the best use of Laquan Treadwell was as quarterback?
Ball was intercepted, if I remember correctly.
I wrote down in my note, still doesn't work, you moron. And oh, by the way, the guy that made the play that blew up the pass where they put Holton Gerner into, like, oh, this is going to fool everybody, was the guy that played for him at Liberty. It's like, oh, no, I know what this is. Boom, blew it up.
Did you hear? Could you? I don't know what your watching situation was. Did you have audio, Richard?
No, I was actually calling a game while I was watching.
You could hear the Ole Miss players calling that out. You could hear them through the television calling what was about to happen out, and they ran it anyway. They were not fooled at all. They must have. I mean, those guys knew you're going to see that double pass garbage here soon. And the second a non-wide receiver entered the game, they were all like, hey, you could hear it. They were calling it out, and they ran it anyway.
I wrote this. Auburn fans are going to eat him alive. He's being patient with all the questions about swapping quarterbacks, historically bad offense, et cetera, et cetera. But is he going to be patient with that through 5 more weeks of the season? Or is he going to snap at some point? Is he going to get sick of it and snap?
Lose to State and you'll
at
snap.
Vandy, at Arkansas, New Mexico State, Alabama. I mean, somebody sent us a message that, hey, with Auburn's remaining schedule, they could still go 7-5. They could. They could. But if they're going to get to 7, they better start winning.